I just wanted to briefly go over some questions I want you to consider for Huxley and his propaganda essays. As you go through them, think about what are the differences in the way in which propaganda works in democracy as opposed to a dictatorship. And so, as we start to identify what propaganda is and how it functions, it's going to function differently according to the environment, according to the political regimes. Because, as we mentioned, most of the propaganda comes from those in power, whether it's political power, economic power, social power, whatever the case may be. That's really where propaganda emerges, and it's a way of packaging information, a way of branding. As we think about those in power, according to whatever regime they're in, is going to function differently. So, make a list as you go through how propaganda works in a democracy. We're going to make a list on how it works in a dictatorship, and this will help you to be able to see when you see a dictatorship, notice how the propaganda works, and then as you start to take a look at democracies, how propaganda works in those as well. Number two, I want you to identify the differences in the way in which the masses are viewed in a democracy versus a dictatorship, right? So think about how a dictatorship views the masses. Do they, see them as equals? Do they fear them, right? And with a democracy, is there a same level of fear, or is it more, is there a trust factor? How do we see that, the way in which the masses are viewed in each of those different types of societies? And then the third question I want you to think about are what are the safeguards against propaganda in a democracy? And so we start to think about democracies, we need to think about how propaganda does work, because generally we tend to think, well, there's freedom of speech and there's freedoms, but that's not to say that we're not susceptible to propaganda. So let's think about some safeguards against propaganda as you start to respond to question number one, that how does propaganda work in democracy? Then we have to think about how can we be more aware of the way that they function so that we can safeguard ourselves from their influence.